What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down some important things that are coming out involving the Trump administration as we're seeing new tariffs being imposed. Not to mention what Jerome Powell said that caused the market to shake. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. Anyways, we saw NIO kind of gap down with this news involving China only to see a rebound. I do think we might try to hold above this 3.5 area. But if it doesn't hold this, we're going to be at risk of dipping back down. We do have this gap down here to fill in case we do lose that. We have resistance at this 3.6 area, so we'll have to see if we break that to continue to go higher or not. So keep that in mind. The whole market is in the red today because we got some bad news. I'm going to talk about what that was. Mizuho maintains a neutral rating for NIO. Nothing else is changing, at least for the time being. So I just wanted to make that very clear. There's been a lot of talk about how President Trump is once again escalating the situation with China as we're seeing them once again expanding restrictions and doing different things like that. With these restrictions, Nvidia was charged about $5.5 billion. They had to write off about $5.5 billion in inventory. And not the best of news for them, which caused the share price to actually drop quite a bit. And then what also happened was, we saw the whole market sell off with Jerome Powell. So I'm going to break down what he said as well. We had new tariffs imposed on China by the Trump administration as well. He did this because he believed that they were retaliating again. But it's not necessarily that every product is going to be charged 245% like the way mainstream media is making it seem. Certain products are actually charged at certain rates. So syringes and needles, for example, are at 245%, lithium ion batteries at 173, wool sweaters at 169%, and we have car wheels at 73%, and then laptops and other electronics are at about 20%. So keep that in mind. That's what's going on, at least to start things off. Now, President Trump also mentioned that he's not happy with the way China has treated U.S. farmers. He went on to say that China was very brutal to the farmers and he's going to continue to do what's necessary. He's also negotiating with different countries, especially with Japan today, as they're trying to create more fairness, according to President Trump. However, when it comes to deals between the US and China, one thing that's worth mentioning is that China has set their conditions. They said they're willing to negotiate with President Trump if he shows them respect, and they're implying that he's not really doing that. So that's what's going on, at least so far. But tensions are continuing to rise as we're seeing higher tariffs, and we'll have to see if any deals end up coming out or not. On top of this, we had Jerome Powell giving a speech today, and he said some very important things. He mentioned that the Fed still has their goal to hit inflation at 2%, to reach that 2% target, but they're not quite there yet. It's going to take longer than previously expected because of the tariffs. He mentioned that it's very likely that we're going to see a big increase in inflation because of these tariffs. He mentioned that the labor market may also see a higher unemployment as the US economy slows, but he said that the slowdown is not going to be too terrible in a way where we get negative GDP. He implied that we're going to still see positive GDP, avoiding a recession, but it's just going to be slower growth than previously expected. He mentioned that the tariffs are making things complicated, so the Fed's going to keep rates the same for now, and they have to give the market the time it needs. So that's what they're essentially doing. Obviously, the market didn't like this news. He also talked about how the US's debt is not in a sustainable place, and that we're entering a crisis because of this debt that the US is in. On top of this, I just want to add that when it comes to tomorrow, there's not really much data coming out. We just have initial jobless claims of some data from the Philly Fed in the morning. Then we have very minor data. Keep in mind, there's not really anything significant for Friday because the market's going to be closed because of Good Friday, at least for the US markets. That means that tomorrow is going to be the last trading day of the week for the US markets. Extreme fear makes up the majority of sentiments, and we're still seeing the market reject. The put to call option ratio is starting to bounce a bit, which is not the best of signs. And ever since we got this news from Powell, we're seeing a slowdown. Tomorrow we have TSMC and Netflix announcing their earnings, but we have ASML that came out today, and they actually saw a bit of a sell-off because of uncertainty about their guidance. So as far as NIO goes, I do think that this might try to outperform the market to some extent, try to push like this. But we have to get back above 3.6 to push higher to fill this imbalance right over here. If we can't do that, we end up losing 3.5. So we kind of pop and reject. And if 3.5 fails us, we're going to be at risk of dipping back down to fill this gap. So it depends on if 3.5 fails or not. If we hold it, we could try to bounce. If not, we could be dipping. I do think we kind of rebound in the morning, but there's going to be a risk of us kind of dipping a bit, looking at how the market's looking. To me, SPY is looking very weak right now. Although we had a nice cup and handle like structure, I needed to see this thing hold like 530, if not 524. And I just want to say that our setup is not looking good. This is typically a bearish setup. And because of the fear incited by all this, Chinese talk with the tariffs and all this talk about Jerome Powell and inflation potentially coming up higher, I think that this might actually have a bad effect on the markets, and there's going to be a risk of more downside heading into tomorrow. The 4 hour is looking weaker. The daily chart's also showing some weakness. So it's not really a good sign, at least for the market thus far. So looking at the setup, I wouldn't be surprised if, just like what we saw today, we see a small push in the morning before we continue to decline to about this 515 area. I do find that to be a bit more probable now. I was hoping we would get a big bounce before because we were holding support very nicely and making higher lows, but now we're starting to make lower lows. We actually broke this low right here. We also lost 530, which is not a good sign. So this is starting to favor downside. It depends on the levels. If we could hold above 534, we could turn back up. But my gut tells me to push closer to like 530, maybe get a rejection, and there's still that risk of some downside. For the QQQ, it's the same thing. We had to get back up of at least 450. I would have liked that, but we're actually below it, and the setup is technically bearish. We might attempt to rebound in the morning, but there's going to be a risk of downside now. If we don't hold 440, we're going to be at risk of dipping to not only 434, but all the way down towards this imbalance around 419. So please be very careful. For the IWM, we're getting a rejection off our 50 EMA. We have to see if we could get back above 187 to bounce. If not, if 184 fails us, we could be dipping back down to 180. So please be very careful. ES has a double top right here. We have to see if we could hold above 5,300. If we don't, it's going to be a bad sign, guys. We could be looking for 5150 all over again. With the tariff fears, it's not a good sign. If NQ reclaims 18,600, we're looking for a bounce. Otherwise, it's looking for a dip to about the 17,000 area, 17,500 or so. Bitcoin has a head and shoulders like structure. If we end up losing 83,400, we're looking for a dump back down to 81,400. We got to get back above these levels. Otherwise, we favor some downside. Tesla's looking kind of weak or making lower highs. Also, one thing worth mentioning about Tesla is the fact that we are showing weakness because we're barely holding this 240 area. It's at critical support. So we'll see if this holds or not. We might see some kind of rebound move, but then as time goes on, there is that risk of us coming down to this imbalance because of the fact that they may be halting parts of their Cybercab and also parts of their Tesla semi-production due to the fact that the tariffs are increasing, which will affect them. Nvidia is getting a rejection here. We have a head and shoulders like structure. We need to see it reclaim 107 to bounce. If not, we could be retesting 100. We'll see if that holds or not. If not, we could be dipping again. So please be very careful. Apple's getting a rejection. We have to see if we reclaim 199. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 190 or below. So please be very careful as we're making lower highs here. We could be dipping to 190 or so. Netflix is also kind of rejecting. We could be retesting 945. But the thing is, we'll have to see if we bounce after earnings. Now, Coinbase has an inverse head and shoulders like structure. This is looking decent. However, I do see us kind of dipping a bit towards like 165, and we'll have to see if we bounce off that to see if this pans out or not. So there might be a small dip before we see anything else. We had an inverse head and shoulders on Amazon, but instead of getting a bounce, we're actually starting to reject hard. It needs to reclaim at least 182. If not, we're going to be at risk of dipping towards like 170. For Meta, we're making lower highs here, so we're continuing to fall. We have to see if we can reclaim 524. If not, we could be dipping back down for about 494 or below. So look for 500 and 494. Microsoft, we're barely at support around this 368 area. We need to hold this to see some kind of bounce. If it fails, if we don't hold 368, we're going to be looking for a rejection. I do think we test that tomorrow, and we'll see if it holds. If not, we're going to be at risk of 360. For Google, we have an inverse head and shoulders, but we got to hold right over here around 152. We have to reclaim 160 to bounce. If not, it's going to be a risk of downside, so keep that in mind. The VIX is looking bullish. One thing I want to say about the VIX is that it's trying to push right here. If it breaks 34, we do have a gap to fill back up here towards 37.5. That could be a bad sign, so please be careful for bulls. This could be favoring downside. So right when the market was trying to bounce, right when we saw some good signals as we were trying to make higher lows, we got this rug pull from Jerome Powell and the market's looking weaker. And this could actually slow down NIO. So I want to give you guys a warning about that. We'll see how well we hold above 3.6. If not, look for 3.5 as our support. And we have this gap fill down here. Look for a push tomorrow morning. We'll have to see if we can hold 3.5. 3.6 maybe testing. We might reject to hit 3.5 and we'll see if it holds. If not, we could be dipping to fill this gap. So I thank you all so much for listening. So please have a good rest of your day. I'll be back with another update as soon as tomorrow. Have a good one, guys, and peace out.